So I'd like to start with the Tea Party, since it was so clear to me reading the book that it came out of a moment when you were looking out at what was happening in American politics and just infuriated. But there's a lot of debate right now about where the Tea Party stands at this point. Is it in the doldrums? Has it sort of done what it can do and now is without power? Some would argue you don't see people out in the streets anymore. Glenn Beck is no longer on Fox News. Dick Lugar lost a primary, but Orrin Hatch was able to survive, and a lot of other incumbents have been able to survive. On the other hand, you can argue that the Senate has become much more conservative and that the Tea Party's influence is now internal within the Republican Party and has pushed it farther to the right to the point where they don't need to be out in the streets. Where do you come down on that?
I think the Tea Party, it does not have the same visibility it had from 2009 to 2010, but Orrin Hatch is a perfect example of how powerful they and broader influences on the right end of the Republican Party have been, because Hatch survived that party, that primary, only after readjusting himself to the right. I mean, this is a man who worked with Ted Kennedy on some very important legislation, notably the Children's Health Care Bill passed under President Clinton, and also a great national service bill that was passed at the beginning of the Obama administration. Orrin Hatch had to who is and always was very conservative, had to sort of, if not disown that, really push that aside and make an argument that he was very conservative as the Tea Party wanted him to be. I think the Tea Party arose partly out of a dissatisfaction that President Obama was elected. And that shouldn't be surprising, because I think political movements sometimes radicalize in response to defeat. And in a lot of ways, the Tea Party is not all that original. A lot of its ideas go back to the old American right, some of the anti-New Deal right way back in the 30s. I trace through Glenn Beck some of their ideas to the John Birch Society, actually, in the 1960s. I quote courtesy of some, I think it's from Kate Zernike of the New York Times, who did a really nice book on the Tea Party, very fair-minded book, not a partisan book at all. And I think it was Kate who quoted somebody in the Tea Party who said, yes, they call us extreme, but they said that about the John Birch Society, too. Okay. But I also think they arose in reaction to President Bush, and I think this is something the liberals probably don't pay enough attention to. When Bush lost, conservatives and Republicans understood that his popularity was very, very low, and they wanted to distance themselves from him too. And they weren't about to say that the failures of the Bush administration can be traced to the fact that he was too conservative. So they traced it instead to the idea that George Bush was a big government conservative, that he spent too much. Never mind that a lot of that spending was in Iraq, and that he ran up big deficits, never mind that a lot of those came from the tax cuts passed at the beginning of the Bush years. And they also turned on compassionate conservatism as an idea. My book is actually quite sympathetic to compassionate conservatism, and we can talk about that. My objection was that Bush didn't put enough meat on the bones, enough money behind the talk, except in the case of AIDS in Africa, where I do think he was quite courageous. But they wanted to jettison that, and so it was a kind of twofer. It was Obama's election, but it was also how do you redefine yourself vis-a-vis Bush. They chose to redefine themselves to Bush's right. And so for those of us who are progressive, they are, it's an astonishing thing. We would think we would want them to move the Republican Party more to the center, but that was not their point of view on this. And I think that's where a lot of that energy came from. And then the health care bill kind of crystallized it and became, even though it was, as everybody knows, originally a Republican idea, it became a symbol of the new big government that they were revolting against.